So for the first time in a decade, we have a Lord of the Rings film, The War of the Rohirrim. The last one, obviously, being The Hobbit and the Battle of the Five Armies. Ugh. So, I'm not exactly the biggest Lord of the Rings fan. Like, I like the movies just fine, I like the books just fine, but they're not one of the franchises I really got into. They're not ones like Harry Potter, like other fantasy novels and adaptations of those novels that I got into, like Harry Potter or the Chronicles of Narnia. One of those are the ones I usually got into. I never really got fully into Lord of the Rings. But I still decided to check this movie out, and I'd heard some bad things, obviously. Most big franchises, now you hear bad things from it, whether the movie's bad or not. I had a feeling this was going to be pretty bad, but I will say, it is definitely not the worst Lord of the Rings film. Because hours before seeing this, I just watched the animated Return of the King. And, the Rankin Bass one from the 80s. And that was not good, to say the least. And honestly, neither was the animated Hobbit. And I'd probably watch this over Desolation of Smaug and Battle of the Five Armies as well, because those were absolutely dreadful. Unexpected Journey was fine, but the other two sequels were dreadful. So this is definitely not the worst Lord of the Rings film or Middle-earth film we've gotten out of the 10. In fact, it ends up almost in the middle of the pack. But that does not mean it is a good film, because like I said, a lot of the other ones that it's above are kind of shitty. And I figured and here's the biggest problem with this movie before it even starts, is just the concept. This is basically just an origin story for Helm's Deep. No, really. And it's not even like Helm Hammerhead. Sorry, my allergies are coming back. It's not even like Helm Hammerhand. That's hard to say fast. Helm Hammerhand. It's not even like he's the protagonist of this movie. It's his daughter Hera, who, if I'm not mistaken, was only briefly mentioned once in the novels, and I don't even know was mentioned at all in the movies. So yeah, that's our protagonist for this film, and you know why? Because the studio wanted their big Mary Sue female lead, because they didn't learn from Rings of Power. And I will say the protagonist was a lot less Mary Sue than Galadriel or some of the other ones we've gotten. Like, for a while, this movie was giving me 2020 Mulan vibes, which is not a good sign, but it was a little less insufferable than that. Partly because, although one thing is that she never loses a fight in this, just like those other characters, which is fucking ridiculous. But at least I will say, in some of those instances, it was by pure luck. Like, she was attacked by during the siege of Rohan. One of the guards ends up finding her and fights her and technically beats her, and she has to be bailed out by her horse and ends up stabbing him with a pitchfork. So that one was mostly pure luck, but it still isn't lost on me the fact that she never loses a fight and seems to be just better than everybody else. It's still not lost on me because they still didn't fucking learn from Rings of Power, which is fucking awful, by the way. But you guys already know that. And there's just some odd scenes in this movie. Like, there's a flashback to when Hera and the villain of the film, Wolf, when they're playing as kids, and he has like an Anakin Skywalker scar when he's older. It goes like right over his eye. Apparently, Hera gave that to him when they were playing as kids. They were playing with real fucking weapons. You figure that one out. So yeah, that's a great way for your main villain to have this quote-unquote badass scar, getting it by being an idiot as a kid. And other stupid scenes, like when Hera gets kidnapped, she doesn't even think to try to draw her down. They just put it's not like they tie her up or knock her out or anything. They put a bag over her head, and the guy carries her like fucking Princess Fiona, and she acts like Princess Fiona, just yelling and screaming at him to put her down, instead of trying to draw her dagger, which they do not take until later, because she still has it on her belt when they're walking away. So, yeah, that's great. And you know damn well her brothers are gonna die during the big Battle of Rohan because of this long scene where they're talking to each other, and just the way they talk, the way it's framed, everything, you know they're gonna die, and that's exactly what happens. I will say the way they died were kind of dark in a way that was kind of ballsy that I wasn't expecting for this movie. I know it's a PG-13, so they were able to get away with it, but I was still a bit surprised at how dark they actually made it, and I'm totally okay with that. And one of the things that really irritated me was the ending, which was kind of set up about halfway through the film, give or take. By the way, this film is 2 hours and 14 minutes, and that's way too long. There is a lot of time dedicated before and after the Rohan battle that's just sitting around doing nothing. Honestly, a lot of the siege when they're in Helm's Deep before the actual battle, you could probably cut a lot of that. Like, I know it's supposed to simulate, like, showing how dire the situation is, like how they're trapped down here with very little resources and everything. And their leader is in kind of a coma-ish, not really. Which, by the way, he comes back and starts taking out Wolf's men. The way he dies is incredibly dumb because he's just fighting off Wolf's men at the gate and just freezes to death while doing so. Isn't killed heroically by the villain or anything, because the villain of this movie is a pussy. And I say that with no hyperbole. Even basically his right-hand man named, is it Targ or Turg or something like that? It's something like that, who's actually a really cool character. He actually constantly he's the much smarter character here, because Wolf is a fucking moron as well. He does basically everything in his power to make the wrong decision every single time, whether it's blowing through resources, making his people work through the winter, and basically having them die, and them being killed off by Helm in the middle of the night, having them constantly be massacred in the middle of the night, and he just doesn't give a shit because he's too fixated on revenge, because, again, he's a fucking moron. But not only that, but later on, probably my favorite part was when, I keep wanting to call her Galadriel, Hera, basically, she challenges him to a duel, and Targ tells him to go against it because it's obviously a trick, there's something going on. And then later, when he loses the duel, because of course he does, he orders the attack anyway, even though basically the terms was if he loses, they fuck off. And he didn't do that, and Targ straight up refused to order the attack, and he basically says what I'd been thinking of of Wolf throughout the entire film. He's a coward, and he has absolutely no honor, which of course means that Wolf kills Targ immediately after saying that, which I guess kind of makes sense. He is the villain, and his right-hand man just committed insubordination, so it still makes sense, even though that was the only character I actually liked in this movie. Even the heroes I wasn't the biggest fan of, except for maybe her one friend, I don't remember what his name is, who basically becomes the new king of Rohan at the end of the movie. He's kind of cool. He's not in the movie much, but he's kind of cool. I don't really care about Hera. She's she's the same bland Mary Sue female protagonist you get in every single one of these movies. She's Galadriel from Rings of Power. She's 2020 Mulan. She's Rey from Star Wars. She's all of these characters, and she just has no she's less insufferable than those characters, because she doesn't act like she's better than everybody. She actually kind of knows she's not qualified to do a lot of this shit. Even though, like, especially, like, during the fight, like, before the Battle of Rohan, she wants to help with the battle, even though she knows she's not exactly the best equipped for combat. She's saying, oh, she has the fastest horse. She can direct messages between the town and the battlefield and everything. So at least they're a bit aware that she's not exactly equipped to do this, but then they kind of forget about that in the second half of the movie, so there goes that, I guess. But something that really annoyed me, one, at the end of the movie, there was a cameo by Saruman, and they used recycled audio of Christopher Lee, and I never find this stuff to be an endearing tribute. I always find this to be incredibly shallow fan service, or, like, not exactly fan service, but the worst kind of fan service. Like, it's there to to say, hey, look at this, look what's in our movie, come watch our movie. Like, the same thing Star Wars does with every single one of their shows. Like, with The Acolyte, oh, look at this, we had a cameo by Darth Plagueis that made no fucking sense. Or, look at The Mandalorian, look at our Luke Skywalker sequences, look at Book of Boba Fett, we brought in The Mandalorian. And then, okay, so, early in the movie, during the siege, I'm gonna call it the Siege of Helm's Deep, where they're, like, stuck in the helm, and they're building this tower to essentially to do it. And Wolf is creating a siege tower. First of all, when I keep wanting to call her Galadriel, when Hera finds the giant eagles, because of course she does, because remember this from Lord of the Rings, from the good Lord of the Rings movies. But she has them. I don't even know what they do. I don't even remember, because they didn't really, I guess they got some people out, but they didn't really show it. They kind of just disappeared. Why didn't you just have the eagles knock over the tower? They're big enough. All you have to do is, because that tower looks kind of flimsy, all you have to do is just take it out at the bottom and the whole thing's going to collapse. So, why not just do that? But I digress. At some point, she comes across a couple of orcs who were killed by Helm in a little bit, but they are looking over the dead bodies collecting rings. And I made a joke of, oh, they're looking, I literally made a joke, like, while I'm sitting there, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, look at this, they're looking for the one ring for Sauron. And that turned out to actually be true. Because at the end of the film, Hera talks to one of her friends, it's like Olin or something like that, and then she says that they're going to go meet with a wizard who wants more information about the orcs that were collecting the rings, which tells me that my joke that they were looking for the one ring for Sauron is exactly what they were doing. Because, again, remember the good Lord of the Rings movies? Remember the Peter Jackson films? Speaking of remember the Peter Jackson films, I noticed there was a lot of music from the Peter Jackson films. They weren't exactly note for note, but they were pretty close, especially in the opening. I could basically hear, it was like a lighter rendition of the Peter Jackson theme. So, yeah, again, that tells you all you need to know there. And they don't straight up say his name is Gandalf. She said, does this wizard have a name? And she says, he has many names. Great. We know it's Gandalf. You might as well just talk. This is the same thing that happened with fucking Madam Web, where Ben mentions he's dating somebody. They don't say her name, even though we fucking know it's May. And Mary Parker has her son, and we all know it's Peter, yet they refuse to say his name, even though teasing it several times. I don't know why Hollywood keeps doing this shit, but whatever. This movie wasn't very good. It wasn't quite as awful as I was expecting, but I was expecting an absolute dumpster fire, so at least it wasn't quite that. And it's not the worst Middle-earth movie, but it's still pretty bad. I'm going to give Lord of the Rings: The War of the Rohirrim a D+. So that's all I got, and I'll see you next time. Bye.